Police officers of Reddit, what was your oh it moment? A law prof in Australia spent 20 years as a cop before becoming a lawyer and eventually teaching. In explaining the battered wife syndrome defense to murder, he told a story of a call to a little old lady's house where she had said on the phone that she had killed her husband. Before this incident, he didn't really understand why it existed. Why doesn't the woman just leave? Why doesn't she just go to someone else's house? Prof shows up to the door and is greeted by a little old lady saying, "Come in. Would you like some tea?" He goes in and she starts putting some cakes on a tray and pouring tea. He wonders if she's all there. He asked, "So you said that you killed your husband on the phone. Would I be able to see him?" She directs him to the living room where the old man was on a lazy boy chair, bottle in hand, and a tomahawk in his skull. Meanwhile, old lady is asking if he takes sugar or milk in his tea. The prof said at this moment he realized why the defensive battered wife existed. The drunk old guy had been beating her for years, controlled all the money and didn't let her have friends. She had nowhere to go even if she left him. So on this day, after saying he was going to beat her if his sports team lost, she took matters into her own hands. He said this was the moment he realized that sometimes there are situations where life doesn't make sense and people take the only way they can see. This happened August of last year. Was about 1-2 in the morning when a 911 hang-up call came in where all that was heard was screaming and swearing. I was the closest unit, riding alone as my partner had been volunteered for another assignment that set of days. So when I got out into the area, I was initially waiting for backup. However, as I was walking up to the house, I heard several voices screaming. Rushing up to the house, the first thing I noticed was blood everywhere. The floor, the walls, the door, all covered to shoulder height. A distraught woman screamed and pointed me towards the living room. Once I get into the living room, I see a male and female on a couch, both covered in blood. The male had a massive laceration on his right forearm, and the female had taken a belt and snake wrapped it around his arm to try and stop the bleeding. Seeing how the belt was applied, I knew it wasn't doing anything to stop the blood flow. So I pulled out my tourniquet and as I prepped it said to the guy, "This is gonna hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bleeding." I applied the tourniquet just above the top of his bicep and knew it was on properly when he told me his hand had started to go numb. It was at that point I noticed a second deep gash on his tricep that went down to the bone. It took EMS about 15 minutes to get to the house, and the paramedic made it abundantly clear that had I not applied the tourniquet, the male would have bled out long before they were able to get there. In the end, turns out the guy had come home drunk and forgot his keys, climbed up to a second-story window and punched his way into the house, with near deadly results. Edit, removed as it was redundant. Edit to apparently tour is confusing. I pulled up on a teen sleeping in a vehicle at the end of a country road. When I ran the license plate, I found out that he was reported as a runaway. The doors on the vehicle were locked, so I knocked on the window to wake him up. Once he woke up and realized what was going on, he shot himself in the mouth with a rifle he had hidden under his blanket. Rough way to start my shift. We were looking for a guy who stole guns from his ex and found him under a pile of clothes in a closet at a different house. Unfortunately, there was like 7 kids sleeping in the same room, so I start getting them out of there while my partner cuffs the guy who is pretending to sleep. We decide to drag him out and I go to move the mattress to get it out of the way and we find the stolen guns under where the kids were sleeping. Was doing a welfare check at a house for a suicidal male. Only person living at the house. Car in driveway. And house was locked up. Gathered some more info and was told where a key was. Opened the door. Announced myself and starting searching the house expecting to find a dead body. Opened a closet door and the guy was hiding in there with a rifle next to him. If he wanted me dead I wouldn't be typing this. Dude was having some issues. Sat and talked for about half an hour. Told me he heard me but didn't want to talk to anyone. Got him the help he needed. Edit. Wow. This is overwhelming. Thank you all for the responses and kind words of encouragement. I will do my best to slowly work through some of the questions I see. My husband has been a police officer for over 20 years. One night he was patrolling the downtown area when he noticed a purse someone had left behind. He opened the bag to check for ID and found a turd. Some lady took a big asset in her handbag and left it behind. He'll talk about autopsies and burnt bodies, but that is the one story he would rather forget. Edit. Thank you for the gold and silver. I'm so happy my husband's story made so many of you laugh. My cousin was an EMT in Buffalo when he was backing up a SWAT insertion. As he tells it, the oh it moment was when he realized the gunfire he was hearing wasn't from the police. A suicidal girl was dropped off at the hospital. Myself and my colleague were there escorting another prisoner from custody. This girl came and spoke to our prisoner. They'd never before, but they were just making idle hospital waiting room chit chat. The girl vanishes. Not bothered. We don't know why she's there, who she is, we just assumed she'd gone somewhere else. After a while our prisoner says that girl has been in the toilet a long time. Perhaps she's having a big poo? We laugh and then realize it had been a while. So I start banging the door. No answer. Door locked. I unscrew the lock and she sat there, wheezing and not super responsive. My colleague goes for help and a nurse comes and unzips her jacket and she's made a ligature from a sock and she's blue and not breathing. I managed to cut it off. It was on tight, we couldn't get scissors in to cut it. And she's taken through to get checked. Now breathing again. My partner goes with her. I'm stood by the door with my prisoner getting air. The whole thing is stressful. This happened in the middle of a busy ER for you Yanks. People are just looking at me. Next thing I know a healthcare assistant is running out to me because this girl is now becoming violent and my partner needs help. I can't leave my prisoner and I can't leave my partner to get beat up. I chose to go for my partner. This girl is smashing her head into a wall, kicking, hitting and trying to bite. It took 3 of us to get her calm. I barely managed to get the assistant's shout out before going in. Radio signal is poor to non-existent. Luckily the prisoner sat patiently in the waiting room whilst we dealt with that. They weren't cuffed, they could have ran and there was nothing we could do to stop it. On top of all the stress that day caused, I didn't really have the oh it moment until I was in my car on the way home and I realized a girl nearly died 5 feet away from me. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the prisoner paying attention to where their new friend went. Edit. Thanks for the silver. Dad is a newly retired cop, 30 years on the force. He has a couple gems that he has told me. Last one is pretty sad, so if you have any type of suicidal tendencies consider this a trigger warning. 1. While working as a patrolman he had a couple encounters with people high on PCP. The first was a lady who cut her entire anus out and ripped the inside part out. She woke up the next day with no recollection of what happened. She will have to be on a colostomy bag for the rest of her life. 2. Another PCP story. Guy was butt naked in the middle of the road sweating profusely. For those who don't know, PCP raises your body temp so people get naked because they are hot. The guy used a broken glass bottle to cut his genitalia off, balls and everything. He ended up bleeding out before EMS arrived. 3. Sad one. Thanksgiving morning dad worked a night shift and was home by 6 AM. I came to the kitchen to help cook for Thanksgiving and see him staring off into space. Something bothering him. Turns out there was a bad car accident and the car caught fire. The woman inside was stuck because her seatbelt had melted to her. Dad went to pull her out and described how her skin had just crisped over, so when he pulled on her to free her the skin just kind of peeled off. They eventually got her out, but she had suffered severe burns and was permanently disfigured. Dad is ended up getting burned up pretty good too on his arms. She ended up surviving but took her life about 6 months later. That one my dad couldn't really ever shake. I think he blames himself for not getting her out sooner. That kind of heartache comes with the job, I suppose. Anyway, those are some memorable stories. He's got tons more, but those 3 come to mind right away. As a rookie I was responding to an alarm at restaurant that was supposed to be haunted by a woman. The first officer that arrived was an older officer that didn't do much and didn't ever get excited on the radio. As soon as he arrived he asked for a second unit in a high-pitched tone. As I pulled in he had his shotgun out and he was leaned up over his hood. My first thought was, oh, it's someone is breaking in. When I ran up to him and asked what up, all he said was as he pulled up and his lights hit the building, a woman jumped off the roof and disappeared. He was clearly shook. Me and another officer checked the building and found no evidence that someone had been there. It made an impression on me and I never went back to the restaurant at night without another officer. My older brother is a cop. He got a call about a suicidal teenager behind a school with a knife. He rolled up to the spot, and when the kid noticed him, he immediately started hacking at his own neck with the knife. My brother sprints over to him and tases him. Saved the kid's life. It's all on body cam. It is ducking wild. Edit. A few people have asked for a link of the video. I've only seen it one time. It's not public as far as I know. This was a suicidal teenager, so I'm sure there was good reason to not make it public. It probably would not have helped him cope with whatever was going on in his life. Got a call for an emotionally disturbed person. Arrive on scene and a 350-pound man built like an NFL lineman is passed out on the floor face down. His wife says he suffers from PTSD from the first Iraq war and that he was an army ranger. He had been drinking heavily. His son is on scene and about 16 years old. The man begins to wake up and proceeds to smash his forehead into the ground repeatedly. We call for an ambulance. A small pool of blood begins to form on the floor. The wife grabs a rag and goes to wipe it up when this guy's head jerks up real quick. His face contorted in rage. He grabs the wife by the neck and throws her clear across the room onto the couch. We immediately jump on him, but he is preternaturally strong. There are 4 of us and we are each fighting one limb. The kid jumps in and helps us get 2 sets of cuffs on him because one set was not wide enough to connect his wrists behind his back. I ride in the ambulance to the hospital with him while he glares at me angrily, reciting his military registration number and telling me I won't get any information out of him and that I'm a towelhead. I don't remotely look like I'm from the region. The entire ride I hope that he doesn't break out of the cuffs. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure we would have gained control of him if the kid hadn't helped. My mate had an OID moment on his first week of solo traffic patrols. Pulled a drunk guy over and the trunk literally had 2 people just chilling in it asleep. Witness to autopsies. Watching the ME pull the testicles out from the inside, or the needle in the eyeball to get samples of eyeball fluid, or the sights, sounds and smells of the bone saw cutting through the skull, and the following suction sounds of the top of the skull being pulled off, or check welfare call. Called to check on a 50-year-old lady who hadn't been seen for a few days. Got to the apartment, looked through a couple windows after no response at the door. Last window I checked had to try and get my bearings while looking through half open blinds. Realized she was there dead in bed, eyes open. I have seen plenty of dead bodies prior to this call, but that one gave me the heebie-jeebies. Or, another dead body call, died in his sleep. I had been in the bedroom for a couple of hours making notifications and requests for remains removal. A belt slid off the treadmill and hit the treadmill belt pretty loudly. There was no reason for that belt to fall off that treadmill. Cops get PTSD too. Edit. It. I have so many. Patting down a male arrestee for a female officer. Dude was passed out at a green light. He was already cuffed. Right as I got down to his right ankle, I heard it. It sounded like a garbage disposal choking on pudding. Dude at himself right there. I didn't say anything. As he sat down in the back seat, the female officer went to the opposite side of the back seat to assist in buckling him in, and gagged. "Oh god, what's that smell?" she said. "Me. He just hit himself. Lol." I was in a community policing unit, right as me and about 25 other community policing officers got out of a meeting. A report of a homicide came out just blocks from our station. Dispatch advised we were looking for a red truck. Fellow officer called out he had a red truck nearby. I was first there as he was pulling the driver out at gunpoint. As we approached him and got him cuffed, I turned and saw the biggest traffic jam of cop cars I had ever seen. Later that day, I watched a traffic cam recording of the traffic stop. I lost count at 53 cop cars coming to back us up. More of a holy it than an OID. I was a rookie cop in a small town. I was driving to a check on a report of a large group of kids causing a disturbance at a school parking lot late at night. I realized I had not tested my PA speaker, which I planned on using to disperse the crowd. On my way to the call, slowly rolling down a residential street at 2 AM with my windows down, I decide to tap my PA mic a couple times to check it. First 2 taps, can't tell if it's working. I slow down. I tap the mic several more times. Definitely hear the loudspeakers that time. At that moment, I hear "What the duck are you doing?" I look out my passenger window and see this old dude sitting on his porch in his underwear, looking pissed. Our eyes locked. I realized I had no decent excuse for clicking my loudspeaker in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night. So I didn't say anything back to him and I floated up the road. Definitely an oh it moment at a time. Maybe different than what OP is looking for, but I get tired of traditional war stories. The awkward on this encounter was through the roof. Back when I was an MP, I was assigned to write up abandoned vehicles on an area on post and found a nasty one with busted out windows, no plates, and while checking it out noticed a couple wires running from the front to the back. Lifted something in the back end. Edit. Lots of people asking. A lot of phone calls above my head determined that it was an unlabeled training tool that had been left just laying out in the public by some unit on post. The next day it had training spray painted on the side to keep anyone only from having the same oh hit moment. Not me, but a drill sergeant I had in basic training. On her first shift, her first call was a mom who had gone crazy. She bit the D off her 6-year-old and used it to choke and kill her baby. It was a total bloodbath. Edit. I don't know what happened to the D or the mom. IDS told us this story as a yeah you're an MP, but you will see crazy type of lesson to get us to pay attention, and it worked. Edit 2. It happened in Fort Hood, TX. Honestly all I know about the story what I posted above was on a traffic stop. My sergeant came and backed me up due to having to possibly tow the vehicle. My sergeant's vehicle was behind mine and we were both in the right lane. My sergeant was sitting in his car and I exited my car to go talk to him. As I walked closer to his car I heard a vehicle's engine rev all the way out, but I couldn't see it. For a split second I knew what was going to happen and though it but couldn't react fast enough. The vehicle I heard smashed into the back of my sergeant's SUV, which struck me, throwing me into the road. The driver was completely hammered and didn't have a license. This happened last Sunday and I have surgery in a couple weeks for my knee and my sergeant has a broken back. Responded to a domestic and when I showed up I heard a lot of yelling and banging. A friend of the family was standing outside screaming for help. I saw my backup down the block so I decided to run in on my own, figuring head right behind me. I saw two older siblings, brother and sister, practically choking each other out while a younger sister tried to jump over the older sister and stab the brother with a knife. I didn't see the knife until I was right next to them, and when I did see it, my first reaction was to grab the younger sister by the wrist, slam her arm into the wall to knock the knife out and throw her to the ground. I then held her with my left hand as I elbowed the big sister in the face to separate her from the brother. The brother then came at me and I ended up punching him in the sternum, which sent him to the ground. He landed next to the knife and looked at it as though he was gonna grab it. I drew down on him and told him not to move. All four of us then looked at each other in silence for what felt like a minute before that officer who was down the block ran in. First words out of his mouth were, "I ran into the wrong apartment." It was a solid oh it moment up until then though. It was actually before I was sworn in. Still as a cadet in the highway patrol, loading live rounds into my service revolver for the first time. Like, these could kill someone. Was a police intern. Maybe about my second month in. I got to ride around and help with traffic stops and basically just help the officer on duty. Fairly small town. Nothing ever really happened there, mostly just drunks and domestic calls. One afternoon I was with a cop new to the force, fresh from working in the prison. Great guy. Now, we are running a speed check on the outskirts of town and find a guy on a motorcycle speeding with no helmet, illegal at the time. Hit the lights, pulls over with no incident. We get out. Guy doesn't even turn around, barely answers the questions through his teeth. Back to the cruiser and run his license. Comes back with several out-of-state warrants with a bowler attached due to an armed assault against a police officer. We both looked at each other and back at the dude on the motorcycle. Officer immediately unlatches the shotgun from the center console and hands it to me. "If you know how to use this thing, use it," was all he said. Oh it, without notice. Other officers from surrounding towns are already lining up behind us. Thank God. Dude was thankfully tired of being on the run and was ready to turn himself in. He went in without incident. Former MP here. Partner and I were riding around when we saw another unit dip into a weapons storage area. Figured let's see what they're up to. Rolled up to the gate and the guard says, "You guys here for the bomb leak?" I'm sorry. What? We are now. Hit the gas and went rolling in to find the fire department and all their investigating. Had to evacuate the entire weapons area, most of the supply area across the street as well as most of the flight line. Something like a 3,000 meter cordon. That was a fun day. Ended up just being sealant for anyone interested in the outcome. Kid drowned at a local pool, so I had to tag along with the ambulances for an investigation. I got there first and saw his father holding him crying and my heart sank. I ran over there and tried to perform CPR to the best of my ability for about 10 minutes before the ambulance arrived. He woke up right as it pulled onto our street. I proceeded to visit him in the hospital and now he swears he wants to be a police officer. When I was responding to a simple trespass after warning call and upon me making contact with the trespassed individual, he charged myself and my zone partner with a pair of scissors. Not me, but my friend is a cop. He pulled up to accident scene once involving a motorcycle, gets out of his car, starts walking over and sees the guy's helmet. Figures he'll be nice and bring it over to the guy. Well, as it turns out, the guy was still in the helmet. Just checked onto my shift. As I turned my patrol car on, my radio was in mid-broadcast about an accident just outside the city I work in. I voluntarily checked en route to help out the best I could. While heading there, I was informed that it was actually closer to the next city over but that I would still be the first one there. I was then told it was a head-on collision. I arrived on scene about a minute later. It was in fact a head-on collision. 5 people from one vehicle were not wearing seat belts. All 5 were fatally injured beyond any measure. There was nothing I could do. A doctor showed up on scene shortly after me. Nothing he could do. I watched 2 adults and 3 children die in front of my eyes. A 6-year-old little girl just stared at me unblinking as she passed. I still get emotional. They were students at our elementary school. I knew them because I routinely go to that school just to see the little kids and give them junior police stickers. Take pictures with them and let them play with my gadgets and police car. I went to the memorial service that the school put on for the girls to pay my respects. Their father was there and didn't know who I was or that I was the first one there or what I saw. He was talking to another father, clearly in between denial and anger phases, about how he wished he knew what officer it was on scene so he could kill him for not doing anything and why didn't he do anything and blaming me for their deaths. That was really hard to hear. I wish I was a superhero and could have used magic powers to save those poor children. I'm sorry little ones. You deserve to live your lives. Edit. Thank you all for the kind words and support. I have actually gone and seen a professional regarding it. That has helped a lot. Unfortunately it is just something that will be with me forever. I am doing pretty well overall and recently welcomed my first child into the world. Experiencing what I did makes me just love and appreciate every day I have with him even more. Thank you to everyone again. And also thank you for the silvers and wow, my first gold too. I wish it was for something much happier but still, I really appreciate it. Worked with a guy who used to work for Long Beach PD. Told me a story about a call coming and that some old man had threatened his neighbor for knocking down his fence. Friend gets on scene a little late and 2 other units had already showed up. Friend sees crazy old guy handcuffed and in the back of one of the cars already. He thinks okay these guys got this and just wants to make sure the first units are okay. He walks up to one of the cops and notices that he has this weird look on his face. Cop says to friend come with me you have to see this it. My friend follows the other officer into crazy old guy's garage through the house. His exact words when he told me this story was it was like that scene in Boondock Saints where they buy the guns. The crazy old man apparently had been stockpiling weapons for the last 20 years. Multiple rifles, shotguns, pipe bombs, Semtex, various pistols, and the Throne, a gas-powered lawnmower that has 2 M60s mounted on it. Controls for both weapons, ammo cans etc. I'm not sure what else was on the Throne lol. Nothing makes you go oh it more than stopping an obvious drunk. Feeling like you could be stopping a homicide in progress. To realizing you know the person. Maybe you know them really well. Not a cop but to any cop that reads this thanks for all you do. It's a job that gets to you physically and emotionally and people treat you like it and that is so wrong. I respect anyone that gets so much hate for helping and still continues to do it. I think this counts. About 9 years ago we get a call from a payphone. There's a dead body in the abandoned building at corner 1st and Main. Street names made up for this story. An officer responds to the area and can't find anything that would be considered an abandoned building. The caller hung up without leaving any information, and the payphone that he called from was several miles from that area. So the officer clears out the call having no contact. The next day we get another phone call from another payphone. There's a dead body inside the abandoned building at the corner of 1st and Main. Again they hang up without offering any other information. This time I get dispatched the report. I head up to the area of that intersection and start looking around. Now understand that I live and work in a fairly sizable metropolitan area, and this was when the economy was still good, booming even. Abandoned buildings were hard to come by at that time. I drive through all the shopping plaza is a little industrial complexes within the vicinity of that intersection, and I can't come up with anything. So I start driving a little bit further in each direction. But I remember that there's some new construction that hasn't been finished yet, and I wonder if they think that those are considered abandoned. I get out of my car and walk through a bunch of businesses that are still in the framing stages, but I can't find anything. As I leave the area I'm now more than a mile from the original call location. As I pull out onto the major roadway I stop for traffic and look in front of me. There it is. A gigantic electrical component factory that has been vacant for probably the last 15 years. It has a 9-foot wall around the entire perimeter and the landscaping is still maintained, so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb right away. That added to the fact that I'm pretty far away from where the caller said it should be. But then again, it's abandoned. It's definitely abandoned and has been for a very long time. So I call for another unit to back me up and we go check it out. We use a drainage pipe to climb up and over the 9-foot wall to get inside the perimeter. We start walking the building checking every single door. When I say this place is big I mean it's ducking huge. It's over 100,000 feet. It's like an old abandoned Motorola, or Freescale, or Intel type building. It has gigantic coolers on the outside, pipes running all over which way, ductwork running down the sides of the buildings, loading docks, and a basement. Every door we come across is locked and secured. We continue walking around looking for anything out of place. As I get about 3/4 of the way around the building I pull on a door and it flings open. I called my backup who comes over to me. We knock, announce, and enter the building. As we step into a hallway that leads about 100 yards down with doors on either side. The door we just stepped into closes, and it's black. Pitch black. Like can't see my ducking nose on my face black. We start moving through the building, trying to clear each room as the best of the two of us can. But this place is absolutely gigantic and each room is connected to what seems like 4 other rooms. We stepped into one room and the door closes behind us. It must have been some old clean room or something. It was the weirdest thing because there was no sound. Nothing. I couldn't hear the traffic outside, or the grumble of electricity or air moving. All the sounds that we heard throughout the rest of the building were gone in this one room. When I spoke to my partner our voices didn't even echo. It must have had some kind of sound cancelling insulation or something. But it freaked me the duck out. The floor had random 12-inch holes in it that led down to a basement that was flooded by over 6 feet of water. Wire, ceiling panels, and wire jacketing were hanging from the ceiling. There was broken glass, broken pieces of metal and brick, holes in the drywall, and abandoned equipment all over. I clearly remember thinking to myself that if there ever a time that I would be attacked by skinless zombie dogs, this would be it. And the entire time we are trying to find a dead body. As though this it wasn't freaky enough, I'm actively looking for a dead guy. We end up moving through the building clearing it as best we can until we get to what was definitely the industrial part of the building. Gigantic boilers, evaporative coolers, and components that run the building. Oh, and spiders. A ton of spiders. We stepped into a room and find that it is a dead end. We've reached the end of the building and we don't have any further to go. The room is about 20 x 30 and contains 5 very large electrical cabinets. They are about 8 feet tall and each about 4 feet wide, sitting next to each other. And they look exactly how I would design the lab of an evil genius if I had to make a sci-fi movie. The entire thing was covered in dials, levers, and red and green buttons, but only the panel in the middle was still illuminated. It had one steady glowing red light on it, the first and only light I saw in that entire building. My partner calls out to me, "You got anything?" I replied, "No, nothing in here. Looks like this was a gigantic waste of time. Just let me take a look behind these cabinets and we'll be good to head back to our cars." The panels have about 18 to 24 inches of room on each and between them and the wall behind them. I walk over to the left side and peek my head around, and bam, there he is, a ducking dead guy on the ground, pinned between the wall and the cabinet. He's on his back, arms in front of his chest like a T-Rex, and he has some injuries, and I nearly shot him. Not gonna lie, he scared the living it out of me. Even though I spent the last hour actively looking for him, I still wasn't completely ready for it. So skip ahead to calling detectives etc. At the time, stripping copper was fairly new, at least to our area. I didn't recognize what the wire jacketing meant, as I hadn't seen it before. These two knuckleheads in breaking into this abandoned factory for God knows how long and systematically stripping every piece of metal out of it, and they made it all the way to the very last room, the only room that still have power running to it. See, the middle panel. You controlled the fire suppression system for the building, and the owner's insurance policy required that it remained on active. When these guys opened up the panels, they must have thought they hit the mother lode. Each one contained an 1.5 inch copper cable. Now an 1.5 inch copper cable is worth quite a bit of money, but it also conducts quite a bit of electricity. They cut through the first one successfully, leaving the sharp ends exposed inside the cabinet. But when this poor sap started cutting into the second one, he got the right of his lifetime. Not only did he electrocute himself, but the current coursing through his arms pulled him into the cabinet, stabbing one of the exposed ends of the previous cable into his chest. This kills the copper thief. Our tales from the squad car.